Okay, today we have Brad. He's going by Brad, and Brad's emailed me a couple times, and then we've talked about meeting up before, and I let him know, over the years that I'd try to meet up with him, and then coronavirus happened, and so I'm not really traveling as much enough to go see Brad. But I said, well, can you join in on a Zoom? So this is my first time talking to Brad too. So this will be kind of an interesting view into what I usually do, maybe when I go meet people. So one thing that Brad mentioned that I thought was kind of interesting is that he's been a little bit sneaking out of the closet here and there. And so we'll have to ask him about that. But let's start out first with Brad. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about why you think you might be on the spectrum.
Well, it's nice to meet you all. I enjoy a lot of things and I do a lot of things. What first brought the whole thing to my attention was years ago, a friend had said to me, we were all talking in passing about things I forget. And a friend said, oh yeah, he wouldn't care if we all dropped off the face of the world. And I never really probed him on it because not too long after that, we stopped hanging out and I didn't really care. But it did stick with me. Now growing up,
Well,
I
really
enjoyed reading.
quickly, well,
Yeah,
why
yeah.
do you think it stuck with you? Is it because he predicted it so well? You're like, wow, he was actually right. Like when he
Yeah.
first said it, were you like, oh, yeah, that is true? Or were you like, huh, that's an interesting
I,
thought?
I didn't really think about it. I just kind of brushed it off. It's like, it's not something I saw myself as, but it's also not something that wasn't wrong. Cause
Right.
it stuck with me because it was on the money.
And it probably, I mean, like, did it hurt your feelings to hear that? Were you like, oh, that is like a sad thing to think about myself?
No.
Yeah, right. Okay, keep going.
um, but so I grew up reading. And if you read, any kind of author, they do more than try to tell you a story. They give you their outlook on life. And, over time you develop tools, how you interact, how you move. Once you have self-reflection, you can't really get rid of it. So you have to just put that lens on your actions. And that's kind of what focusing on my own motivations gave me the answer.
This is kind of interesting that this is now the third or fourth time that I've like seen reading associated with being kind of, let's say, more conscientious or self-aware when you're like on a psychopathic spectrum. So when I grew up, I was like, I mean, I was crazy reader. Like I've never scored less than a perfect score on reading comprehension on a standardized test score almost in my life, probably, maybe when I was very young or something. And it's because, well, a couple of reasons, too. My parents wouldn't like bother us if we were reading. So I think that was what initially drew me to it. And then I just read, for pleasure. And my boo, who is also psychopathic spectrum, also is like a voracious reader. And then, do maybe you saw this, Brad, but there was that, what do we call it? Modern Love, New York Times Modern Love with Patrick. I don't know how to say her last name, Gagne. And I just found her blog recently, and she also kind of says, and she's a psychopathic researcher, and she specifically mentions reading as kind of like a window into people's mind. Like this is a great way to develop theory of mind for other people, but also self-reflection for your own self through reading. So this is interesting. So you think that, and that was the first time I had heard that connection. Now I just read that like a few days ago, but you also think that reading was like a big aspect of how you were able to develop more of self-awareness.
Of course. Well, I mean, especially if you read science fiction or fantasy, if you're a big fan of those books, I mean, it's always about the journey ends up always being about, the hero reflecting on things and seeing that so much you can't help but reflect yourself.
Mm.
I think another big part of it, and something I would highly recommend to anybody who thinks they can work it out afterwards, is psychedelics,
Mm.
DMT, and mushrooms.
Yes, you're the second person I've talked to who has said that that was almost life-changing in terms of them understanding more of the world and more of themselves. You want to talk briefly about that, the psychedelics? It'd be interesting because he does not yet want to be on the Zoom call, but he will eventually, hopefully.
It was the DMT itself that did it. I don't know what other experiences people have with it, but it anything that promotes the separation of ego and id is really what it is, and those by far are the fastest way to get to that.
And so, like, what sort of greater understanding did you get from the DMT? Because he also suggests it's like the DMT.
The way things are connected.
Okay.
Um, so everything has a cost benefit analysis to it, right? There's a lot of things that are calculated, but people might be surprised at how often things aren't calculated. They just kind of fell into place that way, and you take advantage of it.
Right. Yeah, he also
Uh,
says that after he did the DNT, we talked and he was like, I now have a theory of everything. And I was like,
yeah.
okay, sounds like you think everything's connected. And so yes, that's interesting. So you kind of like look beyond just your like cost benefit, like 3 steps away and mostly a direct cost benefit, and you start to understand that the cost benefit perspective is really much broader and encapsulates so much more than, just what you can directly see.
Um, that is taking it a lot further than I think I can go.
Okay. How far
At,
would you
at
go?
least well, I mean, I have plans for more. I'm still in the journey myself. Right now, I've embraced. It's okay to occasionally embrace the warm and squishy.
Hmm.
It costs me nothing to help and put others up. You know,
Right.
I'm certainly like in the midst of this journey, though.
This is interesting. So I mean, this journey, like the hero's journey, right? Like Bilbo Baggins type stuff is kind of what you're talking about. Like kind of like
Um,
these big quest type things.
Not so much that. A good book that I've read recently. The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Okay.
If you ever get the opportunity, give that one a read. And it's so we bank on expectation, right?
Hmm.
We all that's where we play our game. Um, Sociopaths aren't the only people that mold themselves. We just do it consciously.
Right.
Everybody does, and we take advantage of that. Um, Being conscientious of that, the fact that people can be molded if they meet a strong enough force, because I mean we're always the life of the party, right?
Hmm.
You look like you're the type of person that knows where all the parties are.
Right.
um but being conscientious of it, of that ability, it provides it an almost moral weight, and that kind of gives me my line.
What do you mean by moral weight? This is very interesting.
Well, I mean, once you understand, like, we don't really think about much beyond the first or second or third ring, barely even that. But the people you do interact with, people beyond that ring, you'll still have minor interactions with people every day, right?
Hmm.
So most of the time, those interactions for us can be pretty thoughtless. Like we don't really care what's going on, but I mean, it costs nothing to just provide something to people.
Right.
That thing that they're looking for.
Yeah, and if you're looking to kind of like curate and increase your personal influence on the world, I mean, those are some of the cheapest, biggest bang for your buck that you can have. I think I know what you're talking about. So I'll give you an example. I love people of all races, ethnicities, genders, but I also particularly for some reason tend to like Black women, just in like whatever kind of form. I just like their personalities. I like to interact
They're
with
so
them.
much fun.
Yes, so this Black
Black
woman.
women, Black women love me. I don't know what it is, but they do.
I'm
So it's
good
interesting
for
that you bring
you.
that up.
Yeah. So I was at the zoo and I forget even what she said, just something kind of very nice, So it's like called me beautiful. She's like, "Oh, sorry, beautiful." And I was like, "That is the nicest way you can possibly say excuse me, you know?" And I just
Yeah.
thought, I was just so charmed by her, so charmed. And then it was like one of these briefest of encounters. I don't even know that we made eye contact because we were like in this group, kind of jostling group or whatever. But then so is that kind of what you're talking about? Is like these very low cost, like because I've adopted some of these type of things, when I talk to strangers. Like the other day, with a friend, I was like, I'm not actually sure if this is the beach access to this part of the beach. And so I said, "Hi, beach friends, is this the access?" Because they're all in kind of a parking lot. You could tell surfers were taking off their wetsuit. And one of the dudes was like, "Oh, that was the quickest friendship I've ever made." Right? Because so I've gotten
Um,
used to calling people friends or that sort of thing. Is that what you're kind of talking about? Or what would be an example of what you're talking about?
I'll give you a professional example.
Okay.
We had a guy who was low end totem pole, but he had great depth of knowledge. And so I put him where he needed to be. And he's no longer there.
Because he's like gone further up that he's no.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Good for you.
I mean, even that compliment, like, it doesn't, like, cool. It's just, it's, I guess, cost benefit analysis in regards to the connectedness of everything. Like, there's more than just me going on. And it's hard to keep that in mind sometimes, like really hard, because I do some pretty selfish shit, you
Right.
know?
But so basically before you tried the DNT, you didn't think this way at all. You were basically like, it's
No,
me. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And can you tell us like approximately, like, was it more than 5 years ago, more than 10 years ago that you tried it, or, in the
it
past few
was
years?
a little over a year ago.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a big shift. And maybe what other things changed as a result of this shift?
Um, Nothing else. I
Really?
mean, you talk. One of the things your book talks about is, the 2 year burn.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the 2 year burn was always also a career change for me. So, I mean, it was just another career change. It just so happens that the career I'm in now is looking to be the lifelong one.
So you mean by 2 year burn, you mean, hey, it's been 2 years and you're like, now I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to like torch the whole thing down and start over.
It feels more like we can only keep it up for so long before shit starts falling apart.
Right. Yeah. And I have actually known, it's interesting that you say 2 years because I've known people who have it shorter, who are more like 6 months to a year. And I'm like, wow, it's a miracle you're not in prison, some of these people, because like that is a short time frame to be doing that so frequently. And then there are other people I've met. And I think it's because I personally think it kind of depends on, maybe what you kind of do because, she did like trees, like grew trees. And so like when you're growing trees, you have a longer time frame. You have to, right? Because they're little babies and they don't end up, doing anything for anybody until they're like at a certain age. So I thought this is an interesting difference between some people. So I think you can probably train yourself a little bit longer than the 2 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh yeah. You can train your mind to do so much. I mean, we see it every day. In our we bank on that as well.
But
The
it's
things
interesting.
the mind can do.
Yes, but it's interesting because last week we kind of talked about it was with Elsa. If you guys want to look it up on YouTube, if you're listening, it was with Elsa and Victoria. We talked about willpower, and he kind of talks about though, like you can train your mind to do things, but you have to. Like you can't just have more willpower, you can maybe get a little bit more, but it's not like you'll ever get to infinite. So he was basically saying kind of the lesson there was like you have to kind of change yourself a little bit too, so you don't need the willpower, so either through habit or through just a changed perception of who you are. So it sounds like, so for instance, through your kind of experimental drug use, that you changed your perception of the world, And he said that's the best way to do a change, is a more foundational change. That way you're not just willpowering yourself to caring about other people, but you actually have a deeper, greater vision of like why these people kind of impact your life, you know, or like the truth of their connection to you. And so then it's, you're not having to use willpower, because you see the truth of like how you connect with them, and that changes your behavior more than willpower could possibly do.
Most definitely. And that's why I say I recommend it to anyone who's given the opportunity and has, you know, our perception on things. Uh, that shift, that shift is something else.
That is really
It
interesting.
doesn't really change what we are. I mean, I'm sure when your friend talked about it, it didn't really change who he is. It just changed his perception of everything and how he could drive himself through it. You know, he could choose which direction to go in a more informed manner.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we see those shifts more frequently, kind of like in children. You know, like I have so many nieces and nephews, and so I've seen them all kind of like graduate to bigger rides at Disneyland type thing. You know, and they're obviously, I mean, before they ride these like mountains, you know, these like Splash Mountain, whatever, Space Mountain, they're so scared or whatever. They just have like a different perspective, and you know that they can take it. Some of them can, you know. I also took my 4-year-old niece on Tower of Terror. That was a mistake. You know, so but after a while I got used to like knowing what age, she was the oldest, what age range was like. And then afterwards, like they just like their perspective kind of shifts. You know, I use that as a good example because I think a lot of people are familiar with it. But you know, when you first learn to ride a bike or whatever, you change a little bit, you know, there's some skill or something, but it's mostly like you just understand the world differently, you know, first drive or something. It's that shift. We do quite a bit when we're little, but I do think that there has to be these shifts, at least for people like us, into adulthood, to kind of soften the blow of this 2-year itch, or to, you know, extend the 2-year itch to a 4-year itch, or it's a 4-year and it's not that much of an itch, it's just a little bit of scratching is fine. You know, something like that, right? We have to kind of keep changing our perception, because I do think, you know, I don't, as you're kind of saying this, you know, I maybe we do have like a little bit of an issue, you know. There, I was just reading about these fish or whatever. They're blind. They live in a particular part, I think, of the Mediterranean Sea. They're blind unless they have access to a river, you know, because they live so deeply, it's so dark or something. But if they have access to a river, then they have just a little bit of sight, you know, enough to probably navigate while they're in the river. And they honestly don't need their vision when they're down in the bottom of the sea. But I just thought that was so interesting. Same species, but some of them are blind and some of them are not, depending on whether they have this access to a river. And sometimes I think without an access to kind of like an emotional river or other connection to other people, our perspective is a little bit limited. I think it has that tendency, at least. And I think we have to almost like, you know, babies that are neglected, they're not going to make those neural connections, that we have to be kind of maybe overly aggressive about doing that. And maybe that also explains the role of literature in your life, is that by reading those books, you were able to kind of access things that you normally wouldn't have easily accessed, based on your kind of mental predisposition to how you viewed yourself and how you viewed others.
Um, we come back around that connection. That connection is it's almost a tangible thing. And if you've heard your friend talk at any length about his trip, you'll probably understand some of what I'm saying. You feel your mind open up. You feel a connection made that wasn't there before, um, and it doesn't feel like the connection's fully there for me, but it's also like I have some glimpse into it.
Hmm.
It's super hard to describe. I apologize for that.
No, it's really interesting. And so this is you're the number two who's really suggested this for people who like us who are on the spectrum. And I've heard from plenty of people who are not too. But I think, you know, a lot of people have told me you just need to try ecstasy, you know. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I don't think so. I haven't, but I've also talked to people who have and on the spectrum, and they're not, they're like, it doesn't matter. Like I've tried like other kind of like whatever drugs, and it's just like you just feel stupider or something. Like it doesn't have the same effect on me that I think people think that it will. But you're the second person that I've said that has said that this was like actually a very good experience. So that's
Well,
good.
I mean, if it means anything, I plan on the next one being ayahuasca. I mean, I was
Mm,
just down in Mexico recently. Oh God, it's so cheap in Mexico.
hmm
Get a chance if you get a chance to visit. Um, but yeah, no. Next time I'm down there, I'm going to turn it into an ayahuasca trip.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting. We'll
yeah.
have to get a a part two of Brad after the ayahuasca trip. That sounds good. So, do you think it was in part as a result of kind of taking these like mind opening drugs that you have kind of had like a different approach to being closeted as somebody on the sociopathic spectrum?
No. Uh,
No. Well,
that's
tell us a
related
little bit about that.
for sure. So we're in the middle of woke culture, right? I
I
mean,
hate it.
eh, a lot of people do. I
Hmm
do too. I mean, people would be surprised at the number of us that are running around. I'm like for real. Like it's 1 in 10, right? That's the ratio. Well, I mean, if you're in a room with 20 people, you and that one other person are going to meet each other's eyes across the room.
hmm
I mean, you know what I'm talking about.
I actually have only met, I feel like sometimes maybe I'm a little bit more oblivious. I've actually only like kind of ferreted out and met somebody just randomly like that once. But
I
yes,
mean,
it's definitely possible. It kind of depends on how, let's see, like kind of mask wearing they are and how kind of paying attention you are. But yes.
oh, I mean, I'm used to paying attention. Um, uh, truly, I'm used to paying attention to every person that goes by me,
hmm
and I can't really help that.
That
Oh,
is kind of
you asked me a
interesting.
question. I think I trailed off.
Yeah,
The
don't worry. Yeah.
what was the question?
Oh, just like so it wasn't the mind opening drugs that kind of caused you to think, hey, let's try to
Oh,
be like
right.
a
We
little
got
bit
then
more
I said
honest. Yeah, with who you
so
are.
so we woke culture kind of sucks because there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. I mean,
Right.
it's some ridiculous shit.
Yeah,
But
that's the worst part. Like, I don't mind the other stuff. I don't mind. Let's try to be considerate of other people and stuff. But it's just like, you know, the for whatever reason the punishments never seem to fit the crime, and it's like you're just like, is this really the rule? Because what about this? And you just kind of think there's so much time and energy being spent into some of these little minor infractions, and people are like starving in Africa. There seems to be no self-awareness on the uh for the participants of woke culture. They're like ruining people or something and thinking like they're doing this great justice in the world or something. And you're like, actually, it would be great if you just like donated some of your money or spent some time at a nonprofit or whatever, like instead of doing this. That is like a net benefit to the world. But anyways, go ahead.
no,
Well,
no, you hit the nail on the head. But I, when people are crazy, when there's chaos, that's when the most can be done, good or bad.
mm-hmm.
Um, so I want to see a lot of good pushed through, or at least, I mean, I don't know. Like maybe this is the only way it can be done. Who knows? I mean, we're certainly not participating hard enough for any type of lead to be taken.
So you're saying maybe
Oh
like woke
no,
culture
and
and the chaos?
moving on from that, like we as a person, like the
Mm-hmm.
type of people we are, if we don't, so my total outlook on it is have as much fun as possible with it. If we don't understand what we are, we always burn out. We always break something. We always do something wrong. Or someone, you know, you can't say that we don't take some sort of guilty pleasure in breaking people.
Right. So you're
But
saying, okay, keep go.
but instead of I don't know, consciously being aware of that, like we always, you raise them up before you take them down. So I mean, stop at the raising them up is kind of where I'm at.
Hmm.
For a lot of people, I mean, there's some people where you get that anger. They're deploying some form of control over you that you don't think they have, and you just want to fucking break them. But you know, occasionally letting that go is not a bad thing.
Yes, my boo Arya says that when it's funny you mentioned this because that's when like I get the angriest. Another psychopath called it gray rage, but she said it's like when somebody has a false sense of their own authority and also a false
For
sense of their
real.
own safety.
For real.
I don't know why that is so triggering to us, but it's like when she gets gray
Because it's a
ragey, I'm
form
like,
it's a form of hypocrisy. We kind of see ourselves in that because we are that.
yeah,
But for them to do it to us, it's our own private form of hypocrisy.
yes,
But
and
I mean,
it's
it
very
still fucking
irrational for me.
comes.
For me, it's
Oh my
like
god.
1 to 60, and it's like, how much can I control this?
Oh
Honestly,
my
I
god.
am not really in control anymore.
This one lady has had me over a fucking bucket lately. It has fucked with me hard, but we're coming out the other side. It'll be okay.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard thing. Yeah, when she gets that way, I'm like, we need to go home. We need to.
Well, I mean, all I had to do was prove that I did my job better than she did hers.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it can be motivating. Yeah, but those first, few moments of it when you
Oh,
realize
weeks of it. It's weeks of that slow burning rage. Like
uh,
it's that rage you talked about in your book that, I'm about to murder someone.
yes, it is that rage. That was exactly what I was feeling with that person. Was like, you're going to try to tell me that I can't go on an escalator that's not broken. It's just not working, but it's just stairs when the escalator's not running, right? I was just like, and the thing is, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go down this escalator to, mess with this dude or whatever. It was like I could not understand the signage. I couldn't understand what was going on with it, and he was just so weird about it. He's like trying to make me realize, well, it's a wrong thing to do or whatever. I'm like, okay. I mean, he in some ways escalated it.
So this whole Zoom meeting, the topic was coming out to loved ones, right? And there's one thing I wanted to touch upon before this ended.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, please, let's move to that.
so let's ask the big question here. Does the loved one understand? Yeah, that's the real one, isn't it? And the answer
Understand,
is
like, what it
what?
means to be different, this sort of different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do they? No. No, they
No,
don't.
it's really
Especially
hard.
when we especially when we soften the blows for them. Um, if they come to you with questions, which of course I've done. I've never told a lie, but I have softened things. Um, because of COVID, we're actually separated by some distance right now, at COVID and other things.
Hmm.
Um, and she's like, lately, she's like, you're not very romantic, or you used to think about me more. Um, and the best I can tell her is, I do love you. I just don't think about you all the time.
Yeah. You know,
Um,
I call this like people just slip off your radar. And I think for the normal person, it feels terrible and they can tell, they can tell that they're off your radar, but it's like, I mean, you didn't do it intentionally. It
no.
really is hard to keep people on your radar or whatever. I think, if you're like living with them and stuff, it's probably easier if you've gotten more practice doing it, I guess. You've seen more of the truth of them. It's harder for to kind of just let them slip off your awareness. But I do think,
Mhm.
I mean, I've had other people, even normal people, say, yeah, when I'm off so and so's radar, it just feels like, like when they're looking at you, when their attention is focused on you, it feels like the warmest sun. And when you slip off the radar, it feels like, the coldest night type thing.
Oh, oh yeah. Um, we always pass the jealousy test. I don't know how it is for men, but I know women have that. I don't know what it is with y'all. Y'all just do this jealousy test thing.
What is
We
the
always
jealousy
pass.
test?
It's like, how jealous can a man get in a relationship? Is he relationship material? You know,
Uh-huh.
there's various ways that people test if someone's, relationship material, but I'm
I
sure,
see. So they're talking to like another dude or something, and that's supposed to be the jealousy test.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
It's different. It's different. It's a little different for everyone.
Yeah, and they
Um,
probably have their own little rules. I've heard them before, like if a man blah 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 when this happens.
well, I mean, that's why we're so easy to fall in love with. We hit all those good marks where that just make them feel good.
Yeah, because we're like we're not kind of like, I think the jealousy suggests an emotional volatility. Like, is this person going to be emotionally stable enough to have like a close intimate relationship with them without feeling like you're going to be unsafe in the relationship, right, for whatever reason. And we are very emotionally stable to the extent that we're very not emotionally
Except
volatile.
except when we're angry.
Yeah, the gray rage. Yeah. Uh-huh. Right. But if they never see that, if there's never a circumstance that they even see that, then, I would guess that they would think, hey, yeah, this person is like a rock, compared to
Yeah.
some other people.
Yeah, so she did see a lot of it, because we interact a lot professionally, and so it was a big surprise for her, because I couldn't keep it all the way down. I
So
could do
she
it for for everyone else, but we interacted so closely that she still saw it.
little hints of like psychopathic behavior or thinking.
Yes,
Hmm.
especially in regards to the person I was angry with.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, because and here's kind of a weird thing. What situation was I thinking about? Like, I got in like a weird situation either on vacation or it was like a doctor's office or something. And I honestly think those weird situations, which are like not just pleasant conversation, cocktail party type conversation, that type of stuff, those are usually where you get in the weirdest situations, like being pulled over by a cop. Like, I think cops always react to me really poorly because I think it's because I'm not giving them like the correct deference. Like
Yep.
airport security, same thing, where I'm almost always getting secondary screened. What?
I invoke a lot of rage in boyfriends just by being present.
Yeah,
I
because you're not,
I love
for
to
some
just
reason.
they they sense it. They don't sense, what we are, but they sense that, maybe their girlfriend isn't as safe as they think that, she is, in a relationship manner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something about us that kind of suggests, hey, at least unpredictable, at the very least unpredictable, and because of unpredictable, maybe threat,
Yeah.
and let's go ahead and investigate this, or what, let's go ahead and give the ticket. And
Yep. I
maybe.
always got the ticket. I didn't get away with. I was almost never doing anything wrong, and I still got in trouble. And that's kind of what kept me on the straight and narrow. Is I was guilty regardless of what I did every time.
Mm,
So, and I'm not really blaming anyone for that. No cops or anything like that. It's just I got that guilty face, I guess.
yeah, yeah, where they're just like, even if this isn't the situation that this person did something wrong, there probably have been other situations. That's kind of like a vibe. And it's weird because
Yeah.
not every single cop, not every single security person or whatever, but I've gotten so many confrontations like this over my life that I know, at least for some people, there's a bad vibe or something that they're getting.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair to the cops, I like to get up to shit I wasn't supposed to, and I like to be in places I wasn't supposed to be. So I mean, it's not like they were wrong.
Yeah, they're not wrong. So with
It's
this,
just in the times they caught me, I wasn't doing anything wrong.
I see. Yeah. Yeah, I have a friend like that. He's like, I cheat on my taxes, and so even if they caught me, one time they
Oh
said,
God.
hey, you made a mistake, you owe us all this money. And then he was like, went to an accountant. And the accountant was like, oh no, they're wrong. But he was like, I was just willing to pay the $50,000 or whatever, because it's like he's been cheating so for so long, he owes at least that much. So I'm like, no, I wouldn't. I'd still fight it.
No, I feel him on that. I mean, I mean, I'm getting away with so much more. It's like accepting a slap on the wrist to continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
A lot of the times, that's what that sounds like, and that's probably how he took it.
Yeah. So with this woman that you're being kind of more honest with, so we talk about, she's starting to pick up too that she like slides off your radar. That's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I feel like I've been trying to get better at that for the past several years, and still it's like a thing that can happen. But what else about, like, so she sees who you are, like what were some of the things that she first noticed? Just that you were kind of emotionally cold?
No, I mean, the first thing I did drew her attention, and it was on accident. And then after that, I was cavalier about certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I was fun. I was what we are.
Right. Cavalier
I
is
mean,
a great word for it. It's like
cavalier.
a perfect word where it's not even the behavior. And I think that's what the cops pick up on. It's like the underlying attitude.
Yep. So I was cavalier in a certain way that attracts people. Um, and our relationship just started. I mean, it started like they always do, right? But it's just over time. I don't text her as much, or message her as much, or call her as much. And really, I'm just doing other things. I'm not really trying to be malicious or anything. It's just I just forget.
Right. When you say it started like they all do you mean like how all relationships start like normal people, or like all relationships with you
All all
start?
all of my relationships have been pretty fiery,
Hmm.
and started pretty fiery, and I would assume it's like that for a lot of us.
Well, a genuine relationship, I think, there's almost like an obsessive element to it at first. You're just so taken with the person. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
are you talking about it from our perspective or theirs?
Well, I mean, when I get kind of like it's like a shiny new toy or whatever, you're like, wow, okay, this
Yeah.
this person, and they
No, I'm
especially,
talking. I'm using their perspective.
oh, their perspective. Yes, I'm sure
Yeah,
it's really intense because it's kind of like what I said. When your attention is on them, they say that the sun is shining, warm as sun or whatever,
and
and
that's see this. But this interaction right here bring circles back around to another point about that understanding of what we are.
mhm.
Is you automatically assumed I was talking about our perspective, or you didn't go beyond our perspective, and I was trying to use how the other person feels in their interactions with
Good for
us.
you, learning how to take another person's perspective into account, and talking about that
Or
first rather
I,
than us first.
it's understanding how we affect people. It's not so much understanding their perspective, but what we cause in
Yes.
those people to do the things that whatever we do.
Yeah,
You
I'll
know,
tell you two quick stories because it looks like Zoom is not going to kick us out for time. Maybe it's like their Christmas, whatever thing. So, two quick stories, and I totally get it. There was this one person, maybe she listens to this still. There's one person, she was doing kind of like a nonprofit work and wanted to interview me as part of this nonprofit thing. And I, like not getting too much into personal details about her, but she just kind of seemed particularly susceptible to like sociopathic charms. And at first, when we were doing this like interview, there was like nothing. And then there was like a certain point where she actually said, that she was she said something that was the same as me. I forget now, same birthday or something like that. And it was just kind of talking about some personal stuff or something. And then I, for whatever reason, because narcissist, thought, oh, now I'm suddenly more interested in this person. And it was just like, for whatever reason, like even just being interested in the person, you could tell that she was then reacting really differently, was like, okay, this has suddenly gotten really intense kind of emotionally.
yeah.
And then we kind of like wrote a little bit afterwards, And she like openly said, you know, she's like, I'm worried that I'm like just susceptible to like the psychopathic charm. And I was like, yeah, you know, maybe you are, but I'm still a person or whatever too. You know, we can still be just like friends or something. But I think ultimately she, you know, you could kind of tell it was like one of these situations where she wouldn't write back for a while. You know, she's trying to like keep herself from writing me, but then would break down when she was like feeling emotionally overwhelmed and like write back or whatever. I mean, I felt like I was like in prison and this was like a, you know, off limits prison romance or something where she's like trying to convince herself to like,
Yeah, I don't play those. I don't play those games. I I mean, there's I've always moved those right along. Um, not not the relationship itself, but like you can break through those.
Yeah, tell me a story in which you've broken through.
Um, Dating a girl. This was okay. This was a long time ago. Dating a girl, and she didn't want her mother to know.
Hmm.
Well, I asked her mother if I could date her daughter, and dated her daughter for quite a number of years afterwards.
Hmm.
It's
So you're just like removing the impediment. You're like, oh, you know, well, because I
yeah,
do think people are weird about that. Like she's
they
probably
are.
thinking like my mom would never let me date this person. And of course the parent would, especially when they meet you, you know.
Oh yeah, because I mean, how can you not love this face?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, it, it's so. I mean, we kind of expect the world to change to how we will it. If something's not the way we like it, then we change it, and we expect other people to accommodate or move or get out of the way or get crushed. Um, and I don't know that it's a good thing because people are sheep and they need something to get them moving, and it can be a bad thing. And doing more good than bad is easy if you think about it. I mean, if you just stop and think for 5 seconds, it's super easy.
Yeah, it's kind of like I guess this comes from role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, where they say, "Oh, you're like neutral, good, or neutral." I don't know what the things are, but those charts have actually helped me to understand stuff like that, where I'm like, you know, you can just be kind of like a trickster still, but
Yeah,
in
have
like
fun,
a
have
good
some fun
direction.
with it.
Yeah,
Have some fun
exactly.
with
I'm
it.
like, wow, to see this whole like X, Y, you know, axes and all the different possibilities is actually kind of like helping me. And that's how I describe myself to my nieces and nephews. Or I guess they first described me that way too. They're like, oh yeah, you're X, whatever, neutral. And I was like, this is the best way for them to understand me is just to understand it in terms of these whatever like roles that normal people do. Yeah, that's interesting. So do you think that part of you being more open was not just because this girl kind of saw aspects of you that normally most people don't see, but was
No,
also because of this like 2 year itch thing where you're like, you know, I need to be more myself because myself is, I mean, you just can't keep up a deception for that long, right?
for real. Using our traits, honestly, as like I've used OCD before. I've used those different personality traits to bypass certain things. But using our honest traits, some of our impatience, some of our laziness, being honest about them, it helps. I don't know. It helps sincere people see us as sincere.
Yeah. Yes. And you know what? I've always kind of thought of myself as a sincere person, interestingly, you know, for like all of the personality disordered stuff that I now kind of acknowledge was like mixed in there. You know, I must have seemed like a different person to people, you know, every day or whatever, because there was so much of that. But I actually do like sincerity. Do you like sincerity?
I love it. I,
Yeah.
I absolutely adore it. And so what I'll do a lot of the time is when people aren't being sincere is show them that they're not being sincere. And that's how I'll have fun with it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. It's funny. I don't know if they're related, but you know, a lot of times I think because maybe I'd say something kind of crazy or whatever, people like would assume I'm a very sarcastic person. And like,
Yeah,
you know, to have like a kind of more stable, you know, professional or friendship or like romantic relationship, I'd kind of have to tell them eventually, like, actually, I'm essentially not sarcastic at all, you know. You have to kind of hear what I'm saying as being truthful, at least in that moment on some level, because I think that we share, at least I share a little bit with almost like the autism spectrum of where I'll just spit something out, you know. And maybe
Hmm.
that's just true for me in that moment. Like that's truly how I feel is, you know, like, you know, whatever the thing is that I'm saying. And maybe in 5 minutes I'll have a slightly different take, but it's just like almost like mental diarrhea. Like I had the thought, so I said the thought, and it is a sincere thought, you know, that was truly my thought at the moment. I don't know how stable that thought is, you know, it's not probably a deep and enduring belief for me or whatever, but you know, everything that I'm saying is pretty sincere, to the point where I almost don't even understand sarcasm. I recently got in kind of this Twitter argument with this person recently, and he said in response to one thing, like, I really care what you think about this. And I was like, I have no clue. At first, you know, stupid me, maybe I took it totally sincerely. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, he really cares what I think about this. So that's great. But then, you know, an hour later, I was like, was he being sarcastic? Chances are probably high on that one.
I enjoy sincerity a great deal. The person I work for is highly sincere, highly sensitive. She's a very, very interesting study. Because I mean that's we I study people. I love to study people. I don't. Maybe I'm assuming more of this stuff is global than it is. Um, but we don't have a sense of self, so we take the bits and pieces that we like and that we see work from other people, and we use those.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what I've been doing my whole life. And I'm occasionally compared to someone who's legitimately a good man. So, maybe I'm doing something okay.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You know, I have heard this described, that the trait that's different in people kind of more like us who have, you know, tried to be more, you know, trickster positive, I guess, than trickster negative, you know, even
Yeah.
though there is that still that trickster part that likes kind of to see things burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that likes to see the effect that we have on others, even if it is a negative effect, especially if they're our enemies, you know, then it's like, well, they
Oh God.
deserved it or whatever.
All
Right.
bets all bets are off then,
Yeah. But
right? I mean, that's kind of how it is.
yes, yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I've said that to people before, like, you would want me as a friend because I'm the only person probably in your life that would literally do anything for you, you know, that would say that and like actually mean it in a literal sense. But I've heard other people say that conscientiousness is probably the trait that, like, is the difference between us and what I kind of think as like low functioning. You know, maybe we should like not have those descriptions, you know, when we're talking about like our sociopathic brothers and sisters, that they're low functioning and we're high functioning for some reason just because we get along in this society better than they do, or maybe, you know, whatever else. But
I mean,
I
what
think,
else? What else would you call it?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I understand camaraderie, but there comes a point where if you're being spanked enough times, you need to stop doing the thing that's getting you spanked.
Yes, but how many times do you have to be spanked? That's another good question for you.
I don't know. For me, it was once, and then I
Oh,
found
really?
different ways to do it. Yeah, no, you just find a different way to do it. That's
Every But do you ever kind of get in a situation, usually, you know, it kind of depends on the situation, but have you ever like just not learned, you know, like my
I don't think I've ever really truly learned my lesson on pretty much anything.
uh-huh.
Um, I think I'm simply making a conscious decision to not do some things.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, like like it's cost benefit analysis constantly at all levels. Like, can I get away with the thing I want to do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard, you know, like being in a relationship with somebody who's also psychopathic, you know, every once in a while she'll have like just kind of like this sticking point where you're like, okay, I see that you have not learned this lesson yet. And I see that you have once again reaped the negative consequences of doing this instead of doing something differently, you know. And but it's also like I understand completely having been there before, you know, it is, I think it's harder for us to learn by experience than other people. I don't know what it is. It's like, yeah, maybe it's the compartmentalizing, Like we're so hyper focused on one thing in that moment that it's like, okay, I'm doing this or something, but then you hyper focus on something in another moment that's different, and then like the lessons you learned, not always, but there is kind of a weird almost blindness to doing particular things. Like a good
Yeah.
example for her
It's
would be
like
like driving or something. How many times are you going to hit that pole? you know
it's like I was thinking about this metaphor the other day. It's like you were born with no legs and you're driving a handy capable car in a city you don't know. And the
Mm.
only thing you can really do is get better about the turns you're making. Because all
That's
the signs in a language you can't read.
Yes, that's a really interesting point. And I think that it's not just like the kind of figurative, like what you just said, like metaphorical signs that I can't read. It's like all the signs that everybody else seems to be seeing. I feel like
Yeah.
we're almost like we're watching the movie from the behind, or watching the play from like from like the like rafters or whatever, where they have the lights hanging or something. There's
It's
certain
almost
things that
you're
we can see.
driving yourself around. It's you. I know what you're talking about. I have experienced the same feeling.
Yeah, you're just like not picking up on like certain things that are obvious to everyone, and then on the flip side you see things that nobody else sees.
Yep.
It is weird. And then they kind of want to hold you to like the same standard, and you can't really tell them what you see all the time because that freaks them out. It freaks them out because they think that, I mean, it's kind of like, have you ever seen the back of your head? No, but then you see a photo of the back of your head, right? And then you're like, that's kind of weird. Right? It's an uncomfortable feeling for them, for you to show them the back of their head. So it's kind of this weird thing in which you trying to be sincere, if that's your kind of goal, and my goal, not goal or whatever, I think that's just my actual natural preference, is to be sincere. But
But
then
it
like,
comes off a certain way, and you're showing them the back of their head.
yes,
God,
they don't want to hear
it's
it. So it's like, well, you can't, how can you be honest? Kind of, there's only like a certain level of honesty that they'll accept, because they need to be taking ayahuasca or some of these things maybe, and have like a better perspective on their own self, where I have
sorry
a
about.
rule. I actually think it's a really good rule, and it's never tell anybody something about themselves that they don't know already.
Yeah, keep it about 90%. 90% truth.
Yeah, I won't lie to them or whatever, but I will be really careful. And sometimes I'll even tell them, look, I can't talk to you about that because I have a rule. Never tell somebody about themselves that they don't know already, because I think it's like an invasion too on their like personal boundaries and their ability to like define for themselves what they think is them, even if I kind of
Hurts,
think they're wrong when you like look at objective reality.
especially when you see the things that hurt them, like on a personal level, on a physical level. Like you could see their insecurities. That's what it is.
Yeah, their
That's
insecurities.
people don't want to be shown their insecurities. They want
Yeah.
to face it. If they are ready to, if they do want to face it, they want to face it a certain way, usually with heavy therapy.
Yeah. And I guess, that's probably the best way for them to face it anyways. Yeah, they don't want to face anything. And insecurity to them is almost like, to what extent is their vision of themselves distorted,
Yeah.
from actual reality? Because they don't want to hear any of that, And I can see why. I mean, people talk about gaslighting so much, but I guess what gaslighting means a specific thing, and most people don't use it in that way. But I hear them often saying gaslighting just to mean whenever somebody's doing something or saying something that seems to be eroding your right to determine for yourself who you are, and your reality. Like if somebody's kind of trying to tell you your reality and you're like, nope, that's what I get to choose for
That's
myself, they call it
yeah.
gaslighting.
I mean, there's only. I mean, sure, reality can be subjective, but only so much. I mean,
Yes, I agree. But then you also have to allow people to have that, you know it's kind of like this too. Let's say I told you years ago, before you took any mind enhancing or like opening drugs, right? I told you, hey, we're all connected. you know is that
I,
as useful? Like, can we just tell people that and they don't have to take the drugs, or do they
no,
have to actually experience it for
it it.
themselves?
I mean, because the words themselves, they don't really mean anything.
Right.
I mean, words can, don't get me wrong, words can be wonderful things. You can do so much with them. I mean, just the truth alone is one of the most dangerous things out there, right?
Right.
But that's something you'd have to actually see. It is, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words.
It is like color blindness. Like no matter how much you describe, the colorblind will not be able to conceptualize the
Yes.
world that we see until they wear a correction glass.
And this is interesting now that you are kind of like on to Victoria. Would you guys like, I've heard, I get emails from people that are like, please tell me how to be more like you. I want to be a psychopath for whatever reason. They think there's some advantage. And I'm kind of like, well,
People,
if this, I don't know that it's possible.
most people don't even understand what they're asking.
Yeah, that too, right? They just want the good things or whatever, but not
They want the cool parts. They don't truly understand like what's going on and how much of a Play-Doh doll we can be.
Oh, speaking of which, so I was reading Patrick Gagney, however you say her name. I was reading her blog because my boo was like, "Hey, I've totally publicly peed myself several times." She's so right on that, and I was like, "What?" Like, this is the first time I've heard this being associated with like psychopathic behavior. It's just like publicly peeing yourself. And it's, if you're interested, I would like read the whole blog post. But she's telling me all these stories, and I'm like. So in a movie theater, just because like the tickets cost $15 or whatever, rather than you get up and kind of miss 5 minutes of the movie, you decided to just like squat in front of your seat and just pee in front of the seat. And she's like, well, I wouldn't sit on the upholstery. I need to keep sitting there, and also it'd get like wet, and that's disgusting. That's like not appropriate to pee on an upholstery. I was like, okay, but peeing, I mean, can you imagine being I was like, I was surprised because this is like, speaking what you said earlier too, this is kind of one of the reasons why it's so interesting talking to so many different people is what you said, that maybe you generalize a little bit too much. And I definitely did before I started meeting people. I was like, yep, it's X, Y, and Z, and that's what it is just because I'm X, Y, and Z, and I couldn't like imagine seeing it a different perspective. But then hearing about like Patrick and Arya's like peeing escapades, I was like, geez Louise. Speaking
I
of like another one in which they didn't learn from experience, just like
okay,
multiple times.
so I've peed in some pretty odd places myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to go, but it was still an odd place that I chose to go. So I mean, I totally get that one.
Yes. And see, I don't think I have for whatever reason, but it's just like, I mean, these gross, stupid aspects of the disorder where you're just like,
Well,
the
it's you
brain
don't care.
sucks. Yes.
You don't give a shit. It's just, well, I need to pee. I need to pee right now. And if somebody stops me, well, I needed to pee.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, probably easier for you, I don't know, than these girls. Like the Patrick was talking about like peeing at the White House, and she was just like during the national anthem,
It's,
just like letting it all flow down her leg.
what the fuck?
Yes. And then I think it's pretty crazy to just pee in a crowded movie theater, just like, right? Like, does anyone not, I
Okay,
guess she
some
did
of
it during the action scene or something, the
yeah,
like volume is high. Yeah,
some
it's
of the motherfuckers
crazy,
are
right?
crazy. That's
But
crazy.
I mean, I eat food off the ground or whatever, and then I met another dude, uh, Arthur, for people who watch the YouTube, from Poland, who also does weird eating things, just disgusting stuff that we just don't, I mean, we just are like gross when it comes down to it, much more gross than people I think imagine. Which I think it's kind of nice though to just be like gross together in a relationship, because you're just like, fine, that's just your ish. I think it's funny. Arya, I was like, she's like, well, this piece of chicken fell on the ground, but I assumed you still wanted to eat it. I was like, yep, that was right. And I was like, but did you wash it first? And she's like, oh, wash it? That's the line you draw? Eating a piece of chicken off the floor, but first just kind of run it under the sink a little bit. Oh, man. It's pretty
Sounds
funny.
fun to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been like an hour, and my attention span is actually waning a little bit just because my blood sugar is dropping. Is there anything you want to say before we just wrap it up, or do people have any questions in the comments? Go ahead and give me a comment in a chat. Um, but go ahead, Brad. Anything you want to say to people that are like you, that aren't like you know, that you just want to let them know, or about your experience that you think is kind of an interesting or important thing to know?
Do DMT.
Mhm.
Going, that's like the biggest thing I can give y'all. I mean, I don't really, the journey is different for everyone. Um, I've only done it once myself. Um, I mean, our own personal journey as who we are as a sociopath, it's different. It's a little different from everyone, but getting a different pair of glasses might make the journey more interesting.
Yeah, interesting. And I that's another thing. Arya has been going through like therapy. I went through therapy too. Like, luckily we both found like good therapists that were able to actually help us with some of these weird things, that you like don't necessarily like. And I used to always say, like, I've already lived my life one way, why not just try a different way? That's how I've
Yeah.
always lived my life. She says the same. So it's like, it's not a scary thing, I don't think. It's like, well, it's just more information, really. And
What do we have to be afraid of?
yeah, I mean,
For
we're
real.
not we're
I
not
mean,
naturally afraid anyway.
circling back around to the one point Victoria talked about, it's like being colorblind and then getting a pair of corrective lenses. You're not really different, but you see things a whole lot differently.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, what is one thing Arya said, that one thing that was like a big kind of like getting a pair of corrective lenses for her was finally realizing that everybody is as real as she is on the inside. And that has changed her behavior. It's not willpower now that like she treats people differently and nicer. It's because she understands, well, I don't understand, even to the extent she doesn't understand the person, she still knows. She still believes that they're as real as she is on the inside. So that's been a really big one for her.
Oh wow, that sounds like a journey I'm still on.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Understandable, Brad. And that's another thing I like, talking to everybody, the different people, is that everybody's kind of at a different stage, and we all kind of learn things, I think, in a little bit of a different order. But it's interesting to kind of hear, like, okay, this is what somebody was capable of doing despite having a brain that was wired this way, or this is what's worked for somebody. This is, they were able to do this. And then you talk to people in the early 20s and they're like, maybe I'll care about this stuff eventually, but not right now. And you're like, good, you stay in that playground stage as long as you can, because it's awesome.
Yeah,
if,
it's a lot of fun. You get up to a
yeah.
lot of shit.
If you could stay in the playground stage forever, then maybe I would really be trying to find, a way for people to experience it, because it is pretty great. It's pretty fun and awesome. And I wish everybody could experience it. But then it seems like it's not a stable, stable, like, what do we say, on the periodic table of elements? It's not a stable element. It will
It
eventually degrade and become
well,
something else.
for sure. I mean, a lot of so I'm not capable of being upset about it, but if I had to be, I would be thankful about my condition,
Yeah.
because it seems a lot of people can't handle their shit.
Like
They
just
got
life
so
stuff,
many,
right?
yeah, just life stuff. They can't handle the things that have happened to them or the things that go on or what have you, just life stuff. And having a handle on all of that is a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, if I had to trade, I don't think I ever would. And I actually just kind of like thought recently, when we're talking about, speaking of being more out to your family. So like on my like personal social media account that basically only my family sees, I was talking about some things that I was thankful about. And I mentioned actually my personality disorder, because I thought, like most people, and I know some people do struggle with their personality disorders. I don't know, probably even some psychopaths, like eventually you'll like get to a point where like you're sick of sick of your own ish, you're like back on your bullshit and you're like, dang it, this is a bad one this time. So but I actually am really thankful for it, because I feel like it's been something that has helped me. If I didn't have it, I think I just would have lived just a very different life in which I wouldn't have understood the true diversity and spectrum, broad spectrum of humanity. And I think because I have come from such a different place and have had to try to like very, let's say like, step by step, had to learn kind of and understand that people are different and how they're different, because that it didn't come naturally to me. That it's been like a very interesting, as you say, journey. So I do appreciate it for that. I've appreciated every stage of it. I can appreciate it especially better now. I think during some of the stages, I was like pretty not having fun.
Well, I mean, one thing I would also say is that we shouldn't drink. um, our traits are magnitude to such higher levels when we drink. Like just enough. Like we're out. We can be outrageous. I can be outrageous. I can be fun. I can be charming. And when I drink just a little bit, it's so much higher.
Yeah.
And so I don't really do that.
And man, it is good advice, because for me, I never, for whatever reason, have been tempted, but I know some people who have substance abuse issues with our traits, and that is a hard thing. That is a very hard thing for them and for the people in their lives. That is a great piece of advice. Don't drink.
I mean, substance abuse in general is pretty bad.
Yes. And I wonder, even how could you treat somebody like us who with substance abuse issues? I mean, that's, I think the issue is more like what they say with the lockdowns. It's like we just don't have the hospital capacity. That I can kind of understand better than we're just trying to minimize deaths, because that's the thing with like, just understand if you start drinking, regularly with something like this, like we don't necessarily have the way to help you come back. We haven't figured that out yet. And it's like rock climbing or whatever without ropes or something. Like be careful, don't do a lot of it, and try to know yourself. Yeah, that's really good advice. Anything else before we wrap up?
Take it easy, have some fun.
Yeah, that's true. That's good advice for everybody. Take it easy,
Yeah.
have some fun. Yeah. I always say, like, be your true self, whatever that self is in that moment, just live your truth or whatever. That's the great thing about being a psychopath, is you don't care what other people think about you. And so I think you can really live more of an authentic, kind of sincere existence. And I actually hope that's the one thing that people would do, rather than try to have all the traits of a psychopath, is just try to like live so, secure in your own self existence, your own truth, just like blatantly, brazenly, just your own truth every day. Really try to live your own truth and self-express in a different way, like really make sure that there's no part. Yes. Yeah.
Woke culture is the exact opposite of all of that.
I know, it's so sad. They're like, repress your baser instincts. And I'm like, try to find expression, safe expression for all of your instincts, like accept yourself wholly and completely, with the thought that you don't need to like necessarily change, that everything's kind of circumstantial and contextual anyways, and just find the right context or circumstance in which you can find safe expression of those aspects of yourself without violating somebody else's agency or personhood. I mean, that seems to be basically the math problem that we should all be doing. But well, thank you, Brad. It was so great having you on, and I'm really curious. We should have you on after the ayahuasca. Who knows when that will happen? But if you think of something else too, we'll definitely try to get you back on, because it's been very interesting talking with you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Y'all have a good one.
All right. Talk to you later, everybody.